Nobody? Oh, all right. Well, welcome to Building an Open World Game Without an Army. Am I on when I walk away from the mic? I am? Cool. My name's Nate Fox. I'm the game director at Sucker Punch Productions. And as you might imagine, I'm going to go through the process of how to make a lot of art, at least how Sucker Punch does it, with a relatively small team. Just to, lay it out there, that's the objective of the show. Hopefully, that's what you're going to get. And when you work on your open world games, it's going to be a little bit easier for you if you're making it in a city. So something I say a lot at work, and I think you guys maybe have a similar phrase, which is the proof's in the pudding. I often see speeches at things like GDC, and people will say their ideas, they'll talk about the process, yet they don't really have anything to show for it. So I'd just like to show a movie right now that kind of proves the theory in action. So this was a promo piece for Infamous, but what it really is a great kind of tour of the city, just so you guys can see what the process yields. Turn on the main lights at all a little. Okay, so there you go. There's the pudding, of which I spoke of earlier. And here is the punchline. The punchline. That's right. 12 environmental artists made our open world city, which is pretty dinky. It's my understanding, that a lot of games, really fantastic games, have teams of up to, like 300 people working on the project in total. I don't know what the makeup of the environmental team is, but we don't have a particularly massive squad at Sucker Punch. It's kind of a corporate culture thing where we like to be very collaborative. We believe that a lot of the good ideas come out of smack talk, and smack talk, of course, happens in the kitchen, not in meetings. And so kind of being small has value. I'm not saying that it's ideal, but it certainly was where we were at when working on this project. So we had to be kind of canny. And here are our dirty tricks. So don't write anything down. All of these slides are posted on the internet. I was a jackass and wrote them down on the slide, breaking the cardinal rule of PowerPoint presentations by having info on there other than pictures. But what we're really going to go through first is expectations, which seems like a really big deal in setting out to create your system. The benefits of asset reuse, this is really a talk about how to tile game art, right? How to reuse it in ways that are hopefully invisible to the player. The hex tile system we came up with, standardizing building footprints, city layout tricks, how to do organic spaces, streaming. I don't know if any of you are programmers. Any of you? Uh-oh. I will not be able to answer any technical questions. And, of course, the cons, everybody's favorite section, where we get really negative. Okay, so the first thing in open world games, right, is I'm sure you all played Grand Theft Auto 3. Anybody? And do you remember what it felt like when you got out in the street and you ran around and there was 360 degrees of freedom? Everywhere you went, there was something to do, and it was a vast world. There was adventure all the way to the horizon, and you really felt like it was this limitless experience. The hangover of that experience is everywhere in open world games, and anybody who makes an open world game has to kind of think, well, am I living up to the emotions that players felt when they got their hands on GTA 3, which was a landmark, right? And, of course, making a 360-degree world where there was things to do everywhere you went is an incredibly expensive proposition for an art team, right? Because anywhere you go, it has to look good, it has to be cool. And if you make a small world, people are going to be let down, obviously. If you make a big world where things are really repeated, it's obviously dead. It's not alive. There are more seats up here if you want to sit down. If you want to work out your legs muscles, then keep standing. And, of course, another GTA thing is that everywhere you go, there's interactivity right to the horizon, right? You could steal all these cars, and there are other awesome games like Assassin's Creed where it was a giant three-dimensional kind of playground where you could climb on anything. And if you're going to deliver something like this, it's tough because you have to have both your art and your design working in tandem. We had a rule in-house which was if the player thinks they should be able to do it, we let them do it. And if you want to make good on that promise, it takes a lot of planning early on. And that's what this system is in part here to do. Okay, another one that's important is areas of discovery. I don't know if any of you found this area in Super Mario Brothers. It's another one. It's a really relevant slide because do you remember what it felt like? You kind of like broke the rules a little bit. You went somewhere where you weren't supposed to, even though they had programmed it into the game. Providing people with a sense of discovery in the space is really important because it gives it that depth. And it's also really joyous, So this is a standard. This image is probably a little bit too crushed. It's of Disneyland, right? Everybody's been to Disneyland, and one of the things that makes it so awesome is the diversity of locales. Now, in modern real cities like San Francisco, well, actually, San Francisco is kind of the exception to the rule because it has a kick-ass Chinatown that feels very different from the business core, right? In open world games, it's kind of an expectation that there is a diversity of places you can go to so that it feels like it's a rich environment. In a believable world, you can't go to the ice world and then the lava world like we used to do, and so we're kind of stuck having to use more standard city construction conventions, namely a variety of neighborhoods. All right, so here's the deal. This is me trying to justify to you why it is okay, why you're not a jerk for reusing art. All right, just straight up. How many things are there in the world in which we live, right? When you go outside into the city, what do you see? When you look at this picture, what do you see? I mean, there are 2 dumpsters in that alley, and that alley is totally believable, right? What do you need to make your world feel okay and feel alive? You need a handful of things. You need a couple dumpsters. You need a couple trash cans. You need 5 light posts, blah, blah, blah. The world in which we live is manufactured. It's not one-off. So why not just say, go with it? Figure out a way to use the repetition, the believability of our world to your advantage. Now, this is important to me, which is to say, when we started working on the game, and when you guys work on your game, I'm sure you say to yourself, what is it exactly that I want the player to do? Where do I want them to spend their time? So you make that pie chart, right? Maybe you're working on a first-person shooter, and you're saying, well, do I want them camping most of the time? Do I want them running and gunning? For us, we're saying, what exactly do we want players to do with their time? Where do we want them to spend it? And, of course, you want them to spend it dealing with evil villain layers, right? You don't want them spending all their time running down the street. You don't want them spending all their time kind of staring at a wall. And that works the other way around too. As game makers, where do you want to spend your time? I mean, it's pretty clear. I came from the art department, and I remember working on kind of rank and file stuff, and everybody wants to work on the boss, right? Everybody does. And people's enthusiasm for what they do clearly translates into the quality of the work. So how can you make a system that makes it easy to get the things that nobody wants to work on done at a high level of quality, to make space for the things that they do want to work on, which happens to be, what the players want to be inside of. The players want evil villain layers. They don't want the rank and file buildings. The evil villain layers are what interest people, but of course you still have to fill out your game world. It's a necessity. And truthfully, we all know it, right? Gameplay is where people's attention goes. It's not really to the art. You're going to be looking at what's blowing up, or moreover, like who is shooting at you. I mean, there's no way in the world I could have found my way through one of the Halo games without being shot at all the time, and it is a great way to draw people's attention. There's no difference here. Looking at this slide, that guy who's about to blast you on the train is where you're looking. You're not looking at the bridge to your left. And this is just the truth about gaming. So it's worth spending the time to analyze where is the player's attention, where are the kind of the choke points, where do they spend time, and everywhere else, just reuse. Just go ahead and say, do it. And then find out how the cookie crumbles in a focus test. So here we go. We're going into the actual system we use, which is hex tile system. Let's go. All right, so the basics. This is a map of the first neighborhood of our game. So you can see, and it's kind of confusing to look at, it's all broken up into hexagons. The roads are represented by these kind of white strips, these ribbons, and then the buildings are the kind of the gray blocks. So at the core of this thing is traffic intersections. So think back to when you were 16 and you were going through driver's ed and they told you that 90% of all accidents happen at intersections. Do you remember that? No. They're really complex, right? People are making turns. Pedestrians are walking across intersections. There are lights and all that business. They're so complex and they're so formulaic too. There are very standard kind of rules for how wide things need to be to turn. That we said, okay, well, look, at the center of our hex system is going to be traffic intersections, because this is where things get complex. So, as you might imagine, at the edges of all of our hexes are straight roads where things are much more simple. Now, the edges of our hexagons are kind of where the magic happens. What we did was we made sure that the edges of all of our hexes were standardized, that there was no variation. If you had a road edge, you always had road edges were the same. If you had an alley edge, all the alleys were the same. Now, some of you, and I hope it's a lot of you, are familiar with this game, Carcassonne. Yeah, Carcassonne. German board gamers for life. I was playing this game, and this is when I actually thought, we should do this in our title as well. You'll notice that there are exactly 3 edge conditions to this title. There's a city, like a castle, there's green grass, and there's a road. And the road is the really important one. You'll notice that the road is in the very center of the tile. And what is really cool about this is you can take these 3 basic edge conditions and you can make very complex holes. See these shapes, these meandering roads that go everywhere? 3 edge conditions, man. And then in the bottom left, you can see that there's a big river that they made. And it actually uses the same concept, which is to say, the river at the edge is always the same diameter. It's in the middle of the edge. And by just adhering to this rule, you can mix and match, and they always line up perfectly. All right, so here is one hex duplicated 4 times and then rotated. And you can see we get some complex roads already. The buildings are represented by those really ugly blocks. So when you do abut these roads, just like in Carcassonne, the roads run perpendicular to the edge of the hex, and you can't tell. We actually didn't do any special texture work at all. We just abutted them, and it's really invisible. Elevation in games, it's the same thing. It's just like that Carcassonne tile. Instead of it being a river, it's a hill. So long as the hills are the same, I'm going to do it with my arms here. If they line up, you cannot tell. It's pretty good. Now, of course, at some point, your city needs to come to an edge, and maybe you're going to use like hot lava or like a cliff or whatever. We just went with water, kind of the standard. Our hero died when he got immersed in water, so it was convenient. And all we did really was we took a road, and we just said, okay, at the end of the sidewalk, we're going to cut it off. And then from there on out, we'll build whatever we want, a seawall, what have you. And the roads themselves are identical, even at the edge, even at the water's edge. So they all just linked up seamlessly. So here's that map again. Maybe it makes a little bit more sense now. You can see things like, let's see here. If you look in the upper right-hand corner, you see A27. And then look kind of down more in the middle to A24. See how those are actually the same hex, just with a razor blade taken to half of the road? You can start seeing repeats all around the environment if you start looking at that, because, in fact, they are repeated. We're looking to reproduce people's work in elegant ways to make more evil villain layers. All right, so that's roads, right? That's how we do our roads and our basic terrain. But this is actually the killer. This is where people spend their time, and it's on buildings. Roads, they're 2D, really, right? Buildings are these giant, complex, three-dimensional sculptures that the player can interact with in a lot of different ways. They can take cover, they can climb. We hook up electric grind wires between them. And we needed a way to make these reusable. So what we did, we just said, well, look, there's a standard footprint that they ride on. So if you look at like building A there, what it is it comes right up to the sidewalk, and then behind it, there's an alley. Here's another shot. The building comes right up to the sidewalk, and then behind it, there's an alley. There's negative space. That way, when you abut two alleys with each other, the buildings just kind of, they don't touch each other. And the negative space of the alley provides this kind of buffer. This is really important because it allows you to very quickly populate your city. Now, every one of those colored shapes, that's the same building footprint. And you can duplicate those buildings as many times as you want. And then you have the luxury of deciding when it is that you want to replace some of them. I mean, this is a really big deal, right? I mean, I don't know if you guys run out of time in production, but, I mean, who doesn't? I mean, it's time or money. If you can reuse your buildings early on, it means you can get a sense for what the city feels like in a pretty truly arted out way. And then you find out, from focus testing, right, that one in the upper left-hand corner, that orange one, players see it all the time, right? Maybe that's a good one to make an alternate building on, right? And then you can replicate that in every one of the spots where the same building footprint exists. You have the luxury of choosing how much diversity you want. And for what it's worth, we were surprised when we actually got the game going how little people cared about repetition in buildings. They tended to notice actually more of the things that were kind of present in their face. Signage. Somebody would put a car through a shop window, something like that, something really lyrical. And that's where a lot of people's attention went. And we look at the street. Those are some pretty regimented buildings, and what do you look at, right? The colorful signs. So why not put your time into the signs? Because that's what people are going to notice anyway. One of our very canny artists, I don't know who, maybe it was Jeff over there, said, hey, look, why don't we make a standardized footprint for shops as well? So we just said, well, look, we'll carve out holes in every building. It's the same kind of thing as the footprints for buildings where you could put in your coffee shop or your TV shop inside of these empty holes, and then, again, you'll have the luxury of deciding, is 10 different stores, is that enough? Or do we need 20 or 30? And you can move them around as you will. And later in the game, when you're actually running through it, the product properly, decide if you need more diversity in an area. It gives you flexibility. So here you go again. Some stores in there. And here is the super duper dirty secret of our product. There are exactly 2 cars in Infamous. Yeah. But again, signage is what matters. So This car is actually like our taxi, but we put like a sign on top and we make it yellow. You can see here that we do a lot of hue shifting as well. And, what really matters with cars is that they blow up well, right? You want them to explode spectacularly. You don't really care about if there are 13 different makes of car. I mean, I'm sure that's very different in a game where you can steal cars, but you couldn't do that in ours, so it just wasn't where people's focus went. Now here are the really super dirty tricks we'll get into. Every square foot of your game world obviously costs a lot of cash, so these are ways to maximize it. The biggie is sight lines. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever been jogging in kind of flat rural areas where you might see a tree like a mile off and you start running towards it and you're getting really tired and you look up and the tree is still in the distance. It's annoying, right? Because you can see for such a long distance that you don't get a sense of change or quick parallax. And it's the same with the city. If we provide really long sight lines, you get bored running down the street and you want to hurry up and get there. But moreover, it just helps show you how small our city really is because you can see it all in one glance. Now, the secret to this, and this is my all-time favorite device in games, is the Y intersection. It blocks your view. You can create more streets in your city without having to actually make more because you can't see them all at once. It also provides a really great sense of reveal as you go around a corner. I don't know if any of you are from Europe. Your cities kick the crap out of ours. They're so much better, and they're better because they're not built on this godforsaken grid where you can see forever in one direction, then forever in the other direction. There's a great sense of change and kind of cadence to moving through the streets and a beautiful view that opens up to you. And why not do that in games? Why not do that so that players feel a strong desire to keep moving through the space? Also, Y intersections are awesome for the camera because they're obtuse angles, so the camera can lag and not get caught on things, which I'm sure anybody who works in a third-person game knows that the camera is the bane of your existence. And of course, there are also weenies. I know a lot of people get grossed out by that term, weenie. Clearly, I was not too put off by it because I put in the Space Needle, which kind of has a slightly phallic representation. But this kind of distinctive architecture is key. This is sort of like the evil villain layer, right? You want to be assigned to work on this because this is the thing that will guide players around the environment. It provides meaning to the environment, like, it's the neighborhood with the prison. It's the neighborhood with the giant statue you saw in the movie. These are also fantastic places to put more one-off gameplay where it's very designed because this is exactly where the player is going to go. They're not going to go to the bank and climb to the top of the bank. They're going to see this and they're going to say, I'm going to get to the top of that. Another thing that's important is kind of deciding that you're going to put in enough variation per street so that there's identity. And I can't say that we did a spectacular job on this, but adding things like elevated trains or having a shoreline in one street or some damage or a park, every street has some variety to it so that they're not really truly all the same. And if you can use reusable things like L-Train, then you can mix those around just like you were mixing your buildings. You just want to make your streets all different. Okay, so remember that Mario hidden world with the coins? Gated content is a really big deal. I know that it's totally unrealistic. When we were out there in San Francisco, no one says, oh, you can't go into the Sunset right now. It's been shut down. But this is important because if you give people a lot of space early on to cruise around, they feel like, great, this is exciting. And then later on, they see across the river more content, and in their mind it blooms out into all these cool adventures. So they don't in the first 20 minutes say, I've seen it all. I know what this game's about. They say, in the future there's even more great stuff. And hopefully they're having a great time in the first 20 minutes. So their imagination projects, all sorts of sweet things on that second island, which hopefully you deliver. But it gives you the best possible early exposure to the game and makes the game feel a lot bigger. Okay, so this is actually not so much a dirty trick so much as how we did it. Organic spaces are totally a part of our cities. I'm sure a lot of you are going to go to Golden Gate Park while you're here. And really all we did was we took those road hexes that I showed you earlier, and then we just jammed grass right up to the edge of the sidewalk. And just made a big-ass mound of grass right over the top. Now, these parks are awesome because they allow for a lot of variety in elevation. It's very easy to make terrain have kind of a nice rolling feel to it because they don't have to line up to the coffee shop proxy that you made. Also, they feature quite a lot of natural reuse. Trees look the same. Look at these benches, they look the same. That's not to say you can't make one-off stuff in parks. We certainly did that. But if you do make this really nice gazebo in the park, guess what? That's another kind of weenie for the park that everyone's going to be drawn to that brings identity to the park. It's not the trees. Now, destroyed spaces are very similar. Kind of replace grass with rubble, and you get the idea. And again, these aren't cheap, but that's how you use it in relationship to the hex system. The C-space modeling, identical, except this is actually where I think the artists have the most fun because when you get to the edge of the hex tiles, they don't need to be in lockstep with anything else, so you can freak out. I mean, you can put down rocks wherever you want. You can smash up a boat on the edge of the city. You can do whatever you'd like because, of course, they don't have to link up. Here is one of our meanest tricks, which is we block players' views of the water. This is to help make the city feel a lot bigger because, of course, you only have so many streets. So these red boxes here, this is a top-down view. These are warehouses. So when you're standing in, A23, you see that? And you look towards the water, you can't see it. You just see another kind of building facade, and it makes you feel like you're in this really dense space, when in fact you're not. But at the same time, I say it's a dirty trick, and it is, but the player doesn't really want to have to haul ass across this huge, 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 huge city. They want to get where they want to go. They just want the feeling that they're in a really dense urban space. And by blocking sight lines of water, which is a good guide to show you where the edge is, you can do that pretty efficiently. Here's another sweet trick, which is putting collectibles in spaces where the player might not go. Collectibles are pretty fun, but they also do a great job of saying, hey, player, why don't you come climb on this gargoyle right here? Now, the mission never took you on top of the gargoyle, but by God, the art team had to make the gargoyle. You had to rig the gargoyle to be climbable. Why not take credit for that? I mean, you really did make it. The player loves getting these things. Just everybody wins, and they're so easy to put in the world. And aid in that sense of exploration and depth. Now, one thing that was kind of a positive from doing this hex system is that it provided a pretty standardized language for us to decide what is a packet of information in a world of streaming content? We just said, well, look, it is a hex. The hex is going to have 8 megs of video and 8 megs of main memory, right? Great, awesome. It's something that we can communicate between the programmers and the artists. And, we also used it ultimately for a level of detail as well. How many hexes away are you? It's just standard form of communication. Again, I'm not a programmer, and I cannot answer a lot of technical programming questions. All right, so this is an incredibly embarrassing video I actually made to pitch this concept to the team. You'll see some horrific stuff, but it recaps everything. So let's go. Let's see if it works. All right, can you shine the light a little bit? So anyway, again, we start the main light at an intersection. Now we're going to pull back with the power of computers to look down on a lovely low budge. Oh, yes. All right, sorry. The embarrassing movie, looks like it froze. All right, I'm going to pull out a little bit. Okay. No. Okay, so it starts out with an intersection. Like I said, that's where the complexity lies. Now moving out, you can see, again, the alleyways on the edge of the hex, there is nothing there. It's empty. That way, 2 buildings don't touch each other. We started with simple representations of just block buildings. That way we could actually make the whole city right off the bat with ugly-ass blocks, run around it, and see how big it felt. Now here's that same hex duplicated 4 times and rotated to create a complex series of roads. And you can see like the buildings themselves get duped, and it all just kind of works out. Now elevation's the same way. Here you can see when you look top down, the roads line up, and then as the camera starts to dip, you're going to see how we just treat an edge as a hill to create change. Now, this was a very early city we made just to illustrate the point. Some fancy camera work there to get you nauseated. Oh, look at the majesty of our first proto-world. It's gorgeous. And here we are running around with our early hero, whom we called Gearwolf because he threw bicycle gears. I know, pretty stupid. Pretty stupid. But you can see, you can do tunnels, right? Because you just take the standard road that you made earlier and then put geometry over the top of it. And here's a better way to see how park space works. Bring the grass right up to the edge of the sidewalk. You can put up a fence, and then you're doing additive sculpture here. You're putting things on top of existing geometry. You're not cutting big holes, right? And you can make free-form organic spaces. You can also get a lot of height variation just by building up against the walls of the basic hex. You can also, of course, layer things on top of it. This is sort of an early L-train system that we came up with that can ride outside of the hex tile itself. And, well, this is some lovely, lovely water. Now, big structures like bridges, you also want to build those in relationship to standard hex spacing, and then it just clicks in like a Lego. All right, so that was the embarrassing video. To recap, I'm a pretty shabby learner, so I need to have things explained twice. I thought maybe you would be too. All right, let's go. All right. So actually, I gave this presentation to the art team just to make sure I hadn't messed up, and they said, Nate, what you have shown is the hex system in an ideal state, but what about all the ways that it goes sideways? And they were dead right. So I added this con section just to keep it real. All right, first off, making building footprints that work on these hexes adds some really crazy shapes. So if you look at these buildings, none of them are 90-degree angle boxes. None of them. And this is really irritating to a lot of people who have to make buildings, right? Because they have to make buildings that feel real. Now, of course, the player never sees the buildings from this perspective, right? They see them from, what's the term? You know, they see the tree, not the forest. They're right up next to these buildings climbing, so you don't get this perspective, but it does make a challenge for the art team. While I'm a giant fan of Y intersections, they also contribute to people getting lost, right? I purposely block your line of sight from long, long view distances. And it makes it easier to get turned around. We also don't have any standard 90-degree traffic intersections with those long sight lines. We do have 90-degree traffic intersections, 4-way, but they're not represented in a way that we do see in reality. And so as a byproduct, it does hurt the believability of the world. And of course, this is kind of subtle, but the spaces between alleys become very regimented because all of our hexes are exactly the same size. This is something you know when you look at, you're not going to really care. However, you kind of feel it in your bones after playing for a while that the city feels kind of a little too regular. So another kind of nasty one is that when you butt up two hexes to each other, alleys become almost like no man's land. You might have one artist, we'll say Dominic's working on the upper right-hand corner, and Wendy's working on the hex in the left-hand corner. And Dominic has his memory budget, and he's kicking ass on making his hex look great. Wendy's kicking ass on hers. And then when you put them together, the space, that alleyway, it's who owns it? Who's going to make it look awesome? Who's going to put in the litter and the refuse to make it really feel like the kind of place where you get stabbed at night, which is exactly what you want to do to make your superhero game feel cool. And so ownership becomes kind of a problem. It's not obvious who's going to make that look sweet. And of course, having spheres of ownership is important so that you feel alive and proud of what you're working on. And another nasty one is that, of course, because the hex, or wherever the edges line up need to be exactly the same from a texture standpoint, you see a lot of the same texture. And this is a real pain in the butt for our texture team, and I really feel for them. In conclusion, I say reuse. Reuse in a way hopefully people don't see. Just be honest about it, both what you want to work on, what you think the player is going to look at, and go for it. Because if you do reuse, you're going to give gamers a lot more evil villain layers, and that's awesome for them. I want you to make more evil villain layers for me, so I don't have to, crawl around in your banks. Another kind of side issue is when you create your geometry early, when you can propagate those buildings everywhere in the world very quickly, it means that your design team does not have to follow the tail of your art team. They can work in parallel, and this is a huge help when your schedule isn't enormous. And I'm sure only the people here from Blizzard enjoy that ship it when it's great kind of thing. And I wish I had that, but it's not very common. Okay, so, ba-boom. Does anyone have any questions? There's a microphone right there. I'm a Pisces. Here comes somebody.
Well, when you were talking about sight lines and blocking the view of the water from the intersections, a lot of the gameplay takes place on rooftops. So up there, you're inherently going to have a harder time blocking someone's view of like, oh wait, my city area stops right there. Did you guys spend a lot of time adjusting building heights, skyscrapers, apartment buildings to try and bring some complexity there, or how did you deal with the sightline issue up on the roofs?
So the question was, on street level, view blockers like the warehouses on the water, do a good job of making the place feel big. But what happens when you're on the roof? I mean, superhero game, you can climb on the roof. Did we do anything smart about that? And the answer is, we tried. If you build a bowl, this is what we always used to do in our old games, in the Sly Cooper games, where the low point was in the middle of the level and it kind of got higher as you went out, you would see just sort of wall of whatever it is you need to see, so it felt like a rich place. However, because we were in fact, you just exposed a sweet con, which I should have put in there, which is you can't do kind of a nice rake to your structures because you're using the same building all over the place. I mean, generally speaking, we just tried to put the cooler stuff in the middle of the world so that you would be looking at the Space Needle in the middle of the world and that it would draw your attention. But yeah, we didn't do anything particularly smart to block your view of the water when you were on the rooftop. Oh, actually, I'm a little bit wrong. This is not intentional, come to think of it. But when you're on the rooftop, we'll have the camera look down to give you a greater sense of vertigo. And by virtue of you looking down, you don't look at the horizon. So you can only see 2 or 3 hexes out, not all the way to the horizon. And so I'm sure that cuts down on people's perception of the size of the space.
One other quick one.
Yeah.
When you talked about the cars and the sort of reusing the geometry in games where you can, again, blow stuff up in cool ways, did you have different explosions, different destroyed versions? Like there's sort of the one main car, but, this one's got the front hood exploded up.
Yeah.
Did you sort of, you talked about people noticing lyrical stuff like cars crash through windows. Like the same explosion could be something that people pick up on. Is that something that you can branch out even from a...
So the question is, did we work on diversity of explosions, not on car models, because explosions are what people notice? And if we're running out of time, feel free to leave. I know I've been in your situation before where you're itching to go. But I've been told by the cats with the green shirts to fill out your forms. The 5s are all on the right-hand side of the piece of paper. Actually, we didn't. We with regards to the cars blowing up, we did a lot of localized damage on the car, so that if you shot the hood would break off, and if you shot the passenger door would break off.
But the explosive event itself.
Yeah, no, there's a little bit of variety, but not like huge variety. You get a lot of variety just from the physics of the thing. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Again, I will not be insulted if you walk out. So feel free.
Hey.
Question?
Hello, my name is Anders. 2 or 3 years ago, I worked on a project, World in Conflict, where we had a lot of city locations, but real-life cities like Berlin, New York, Seattle. How would you go about to create a real-life city using a system like this?
I don't know if I totally heard you. Did you say what would I do to make a real live city?
Yeah. For instance, we created Berlin, we created Seattle, we created New York.
Uh-huh.
How would you go about to create a...
Well, did you actually make a true representation of
Yes.
the cities? Like the street maps are all the same?
Yes.
Oh, the question is, how would I make a real live city using a system like this? And the answer is, I wouldn't. I think it'd be crazy. Yeah, I'm sure you guys have your own sweet tricks for this, yeah?
Yeah, but I was hoping to...
Sorry. Yeah, no, man.
Right. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry.
Hi, my name is Jill, and I got a question. Do you think this system would work for natural landscapes, like woods and stuff?
So the question was, do I think this system would work for natural landscapes? And I think the answer is not very well. I mean, you probably want to make your tiles much larger if you were going to do it. But truthfully, we could be kind of regimented and reused because cities are inherently this way. If you were making Yosemite National Park, you can't do that. So you would probably need to look for another way to be a cheapskate. Like how can we plop down large sections of trees easily, or programmatic terrain variation? I don't think it would work to make a Wild West game, for instance. Truthfully, I think it's only good for cities.
Hi, my name's Dan from the Tony Hawk team.
Oh, yeah.
Question about your buildings. We're doing a lot of building referencing as well, but have you looked into micro referencing, like 20 window packages or 30, architectural remnants of buildings, and constructing buildings based on I don't know, micro detail? If that makes any sense? Or is every building kind of a one-off, or are you?
Oh, okay. So the question is every building a one-off, or do you reuse things like building window with double sashed window? And the answer is all of our buildings are made out of pieces which are also reused as well. So yeah, that's an excellent point. I should have totally talked about that. That whenever you can reuse, do reuse, because windows or gutters, all these things are manufactured. So why in the world would you not reuse that? The fire escapes, reuse them, and just put them on the building in a variety of neat ways. But yeah, we absolutely do that. They're not single one-off buildings.
Is it like a proprietary visualization system where you can look at all these different pieces, like artists can flip through almost like a portfolio of pieces in order to put these things together? Or is it just kind of like talk to your artists, maybe they have a window for you or something?
Oh, well, to be clear, the artists make the buildings, and then we make a lot of the functionality of climbing work kind of after the fact. And we just have an agreed-upon set of rules so that they don't make buildings which are inherently antagonistic to the way our game logic works. But they have, all of them have a big working knowledge of our parts, but they also have a way to look at thumbnails of each asset so they can say, bent gutter number 7, that's for me on this building. And a lot of our buildings, while they're made of a lot of the same parts, they're put together in such different ways that you cannot tell.
Hey, how you doing? You said this information's up on your website or GDC?
GDC's website, they make all the speakers post their slides, so I always write like a demon in these things, and there's no need today. So.
Hi, thanks for the talk. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your process for asset tracking and verification, and if having a reusable system like this helps streamline any of your asset tracking.
So the question is, explain our asset tracking system for reusing buildings and content like this. And the answer is Perforce. No, I'm not joking. That's really it. The artists have got awesome so awesome I don't even understand it, forms of kind of breaking down folders that's, like organics are here. Organics that have bark in them are here, and it's kind of nested files so that you can find what you want. There's a vehicle folder and all that. But truthfully, Perforce is how we make sure that people don't, abuse the same asset because they're so shared. And if you actually have a question, you should hit up that guy. That guy over there with the goatee. If you'd raise, You should ask him because he could give you a better answer than I could.
I'm Graham from Gearbox. How much do you guys rely on outsourcing? So you had a small team, and then other quick question was your destructed points of view. How much was that using your hex system, and how much of that was hand placed?
So I didn't quite hear the second question.
The destruction, like your areas of destruction.
Oh, okay.
How much of that was hand placed, and how much of that was also using your hex system?
Okay. So the question is, how much outsourcing did we do? And in the destructed areas, how much of that was hex system versus hand placed? And the answer is, we didn't do any outsourcing. Kind of wish we had. It's I'm sure the art team wishes we did. And the destructed areas, they are all, it's like the park. You hand place all the trees. However, you're using pieces that are kind of already existing. But the areas of destruction certainly are the most, they're very expensive to make. And I'm sure you know this. At Gearbox, you guys make a lot of crazy stuff that's broken. So no, we don't have some particularly clever way of putting destroyed items in this kind of nice organic way through clever tileization. We just simply make sure that they fit within the larger form of how the city is tiled. So I have no good ideas around making destruction more efficient, I'm sorry to say. But you guys own that, so I should ask you.
We want to do it better.
What?
We want to do it better.
Oh. Well, Borderlands was great. I think you're winning.
Hey, Nate, Teen, Sanzaro Games. I have a question first for the audience, just because I'm curious. We have a good collection, probably, of infamous players here. Just by a show of hands, I want to know who played good and who played bad. Hands for good. Who played through good? Okay, who played through bad?
My people.
That's me too, yeah, me too. Anyway, simple question, I hope. With the hex tile system and the loading, with 6 different tiles adjacent to it, would you say that those 6 tiles were also loaded in and streamed in, or into memory, or did you just have the one tile loaded at any given time that you're on?
We'd have them all in at once.
Okay.
Like I was saying, this is part of our LOD system.
So 7 tiles max plus LOD.
Yeah, plus things at a distance.
Okay.
So, it's the ring around you. Sorry, I should have repeated the question. Did we have the 6 ring hexes and the one you're in at the same time? And the answer is yes.
Hi, my question is about the streaming. Did you use a different level of details for your hex tiles?
The question is, did we use a different level of detail for our hex tiles for streaming?
Yeah.
Are you talking about the streets or the buildings or?
Everything, actually.
So the answer is yes, we did have different levels of detail for everything. Actually, did we use it for the streets too? The guy next to the guy with the goatee. Hit him up. He'll answer your questions. I'm a caveman.
Okay.
I don't know anything about programming.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How much of the reuse is actually used in-game versus how much of it is a construction tool?
Okay, the question is how much of the reuse is actually used in-game and how much of it is a construction tool? The answer is it's 100% reused in-game. So we don't, you saw those early demos that I made. That was just to show how the system would work and to communicate how things fit together without using my hands like this, But when we actually shipped the game, that video you saw with Cole running around the city, that's all using the system in play.
So does that go all the way down to the component level, like you were talking about with the windows, each element? Or is the building flattened out somewhere?
Well, the windows themselves, it's at some level you don't go down to the atoms, right? Like it's actually this window that gets made is in fact a one-off window, but the one-off window, or like this bottle of water, right? An artist makes this great bottle of water. Maybe they change the label to make it something, this is Crystal Geyser and other ones like Aquafina, and then you dupe this model all along here and make a variety of water bottles, and it looks legit. So on the buildings themselves, windows, gutters, these things would all be singular. Maybe you make a couple for variety, so one's a little bit smudged up. And is that answering your question?
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering how much you've forced that instancing into the runtime versus flattening it out in the tool to standardize the buildings?
How much did we force the instance into runtime? All right, talk to the guy with the glasses next to the dude. You should just stand up, because I think a lot of people have streaming questions, and Lord knows I cannot answer them with any kind of clarity that would make you happy. So, his name's James. He's very nice. Great. Okay, looks like there are no more questions. Thank you for attending.